Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me introduce myself. My name is Anggun Octa Viani, and I'm from class 5E English Education Department. And in this video, I want to explain my research material about chapter 5 and chapter 6. Okay, let's go to the first chapter. It's chapter 5 about research and evaluations. The first point about defining evaluations. The provisions of information about specified issues upon which judgments are based and from which decisions for actions are taken. And next point about similarities between evaluation and research. Evaluations can examine the effectiveness of a program or policies, as can research. Evaluations and research share the same methodologies like styles, instrumentation, sampling, ethics, reliability, validity, data analysis, technique, reporting, and disseminations and mechanisms. Next, differences between evaluations and research. Actually, there are several opinions regarding the difference between evaluations and research. From several expert examples such as Norris, 1990. And the following are the opinions of Smith and Glass, 1987. There are some points. The first is the intent and purpose of the investigations. Number 2 is the scope of the investigations. Number 3 is values in the investigations. And then the origins of the study. And then the uses of the study. And next, the timeliness of the study. And then criteria for judging the study. And last, the agendas of the study. Okay, next, let's go to the research, politics, and policy making. Politics, research, and evaluations are inextricably linked in respect of the first is funding, and then policy related research, and then commissioned research, and then control and release of the data and findings, and then disseminations of research, and then how does research influence policy, and then who judges research utilizations, and last, consonance with political agendas. Next, about policymaker, like the first, simple impact models, and number 2 is superficial peaks, and number 3 is unequivocal data, and then short-term solutions, and number 5 is simply clear remedies for social problems. And last is certainty positivist methodologies. However, researchers work with number 1 is complex models, and number 2 is complex data, and then uncertain findings, and then longer time-term scales, and then subtle provisional data on complex issues, and then conjecture. And last is diverse methodologies. Okay, our next chapter is chapter 6. Chapter 6 about the research and causations. Causes and conditions. An effect occurs when all the necessary and or sufficient conditions are present. Therefore, examine the necessary conditions and or circumstance for the cause to bring about an effect. Next point about causal overdeterminations. An effect may be the result of any one or more causes, each of which may be sufficient to bring about the effect. A child behaves well or badly in school as a result of many causes, each of which on their own might bring about the behavior. Next point about timing of causes and effect. The first is a cause from a long time prior to an effect may contribute to an effect much later. Number 2 is effects may be short-term, delayed, immediate, instantaneous, cumulative, and long-term. Number 3 is the full effect of a cause may not be revealed in a single instance. And number 4 is temporality and causation are closely connected by spirit. Number 5 is between a cause and effect may lie many other factors and time frames. Okay, let's go to the next point about researching the effects of causes. Cause and effect. Determining effects from causes is often done using interventionist strategies in educational research, instilling and interventions either to test a hypothesized causal effect or causal model, or because is it known that it can exert a causal effect on effects. Manipulating variables to produce effects, and manipulation takes many forms including the first is the context of the interventions and the power of the situations can affect the outcomes and behaviors of participants. And then, the same causes do not always produce the same effect. And next, inappropriate timing of the pretest and posttest. Next, test measurements of effects can undermine the reliability of statements of the effects of a cause. Next, there is the problems of accuracy as a group and individuals cannot both be in a group that is not receiving any interventions. And next, process variables not only input variables feature in understanding causations. And last, the characteristic, personal and specific individual features of participants and their agency influence interventions and their effects. Okay, let's go to the next topic about researching the causes of effect. Determining the causes of effect is more tentative, professional, and interferential than determining the effect of causes because the first is data are incomplete and number 2 is backtracking along causal chains and or searching within causal nets. Webs is difficult as it involves a search for clues and testing of rival hypotheses about causations. Number 2 is researchers can generate a high number of potential observed effects. There is a problem in deciding which causes are correct. Next, for researchers who wish to establish causations, the task has several aspects. The first is indicate what needs to be done to test the theory and to falsify it. And then, identify the kinds of data required for the theory to be tested. Number 3 is identify the actual data required to test theory. Number 4 is identify the test conditions and criteria. Number 4 is construct the empirical test. And number 6 is consider using primary and secondary data. And number 7 is consider using existing published evidence as part of the empirical test. And last, ensure that actions, narratives, and intentionality are included in causal accounts. Next topic about ways in which causes may be inferred from effects. The first is identify several causal chains, mechanisms, and processes in situations. Number 2 is combine micro and macro levels of analysis. Number 3 is address both agency and structure. And number 4 is underpin the data analysis and causal explanations with theory. Number 4 is use different kinds of ex post facto analysis. Next is use correlations, a causal comparative criterion group analysis. Next is ensure matching of groups in sample and that similar cases apply to both groups. Next, ensure clarity on the directions of causations. And then use empirical data to test the causal explanations. And then identify which is the cause and which is the effect. And then identify which effect subsequently becomes a cause. And then avoid over or a selective data. And next, ensure that the data fairly represents the phenomenon under investigations. Next, recognize that cause and effect may be blurred. Next, accept the effects may become causes in a cyclical sequence of causations. And next, seek out and recognize overdeterminations at work in causal account. And then keep spirit the explainants. And then ensure the alternative theory and causal explanations are explored or tested. And last is draw conclusions based on the evidence and the evidence alone. Last all of part is conclusions. There is some points. The first point is focus more on causal process than input, output, result models of causations. And point number 2 is establish causations other than shock reductions and recombinations of atomistic individuals, items, and elements. Number 3 is regard causations as the understanding of the emergence history of a phenomenon or a whole. And point number 4 is investigate multiple and simultaneous causes and their multiple and simultaneous effect in a multiply connected and network world. And next point about separate causations for predictability and recognize sequence may not be repeatable. And next point about remember that randomness often trumps causations. And then next point about indicate that utility of understanding causations if it has a little subsequent predictive strength. And then understands how to investigation causes in holistic webs of connections. And then investigate causations and causal process in a multi-causal, multi-effect, nonlinear, and multiply connected world. And last is identify the causal process at work in determining social and macro structure from the actions and interactions of individuals, and conversely in determining actions and interactions of individuals from the structures of society and its institutions. Okay, I think that's all I can say. For my mistake, I apologize. Thanks a million for your attention. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.